Salvete. In this video, we're going to be declining flumen, fluminis, which is yet another third declension word. Why are we still in the third declension, you might ask? Well, that's because we have not seen a third declension word that has been a neuter word, and flumen, fluminis is a neuter word. Before we fill out this chart, which I'd like you to put in your notes if you haven't done this already, I want to take a moment and review the gender rules for third declension. So remember, gender in the previous declensions has been pretty easy. First declension words have, with a few exceptions, been feminine words. So Maria, terra, porta, those are all feminine words. And the second declension has a group of masculine words and a group of neuter words, and they're pretty easy to tell apart. The ones that have us for the nominative, like Deus and Christus and gladius, which is sword, those are masculine words, whereas the ones that have like oppidum, like caelum, those are neuter words. And so it's been pretty easy. But in the third declension, any gender, a word could be any gender if it's a third declension word. Among third declension words, there are words representing all three grammatical genders in Latin. And so we have some rules for telling them apart. They'll mostly come in handy. It'll mostly come in handy to know a neuter word. Or to know whether a word is masculine, feminine, or neuter, or whatever. It'll mostly come in handy when we get into the next unit, which has to do with adjectives. But it's actually, to be able to identify a neuter word is going to be pretty handy even right now, because you conjugate neuter words differently. And you might remember that when we did the second declension neuter. So in the smaller chart over here, you can put this in your notes if you'd like as well. We had e, o, and then orum, is, is, and we had that neuter rule, which says that nominative and accusative always are the same. And over here, that's the case too. Nominative and the accusative are always the same for neuter words. And not only are nominative and accusative the same, but on the plural side, the nominative and the accusative are the letter A. And so those were not just for the second declension, those were for neuter words in all declensions. Those are for all neuter words. And so those rules are going to come back here as well. The nominative and the accusative are going to be the same on the plural side too, and not just the singular, and we're going to have A's here. But we're going to make sure we also have third declension endings, because flumen, fluminis is a third declension word. So let's review those gender rules. Gender rules. 1, natural gender rule. If a word refers to a person, or a person with an actual real natural gender, an actual male or an actual female, then those words are either masculine or feminine accordingly. We have no people who would be a neuter word, obviously. And so imperator, for example, means emperor, typically a male, or leader in an army, commander in an army, also typically a male. That's going to be a masculine word, no matter what these other rules might say, no matter what letters it might end with. Okay? So the natural gender rule trumps all the other rules, but we have the error rule, which means that if a word ends in er in the nominative, or or, like imperator, error rule tells us masculine. So imperator, even if it didn't end in or, it would still be masculine because it means a male person, right? It means emperor or commander in an army. But if it didn't mean somebody that was a person, if it meant a thing and it ends in an or, then that would tell you that's a masculine word. We have the Sachs rule, which tells you that if a word ends in s or O or X in the nominative, then it's a feminine word. And then we have the Lancet rule, which tells you that it's neuter if a nominative ends in L or A or N, C, E, or T. And that's how we know that flumen, fluminous, is a neuter word, because we look at the nominative, it ends in N, and the Lancet rule tells us that it is neuter, and it tells us, therefore, we need to conjugate it with these neuter rules in mind. So let's see how that works. So the nominative is given to us, flumen, and because this is flumen, this has to be flumen as well. So that M for accusative that we've been seeing, that's not going to be the case. It's just going to match the nominative now, just like oppidum and oppidum match each other from the second declension. We also are given the genitive, fluminous. Notice that the stem is flumen, and the is that characteristic third declension ending. There can never be any exceptions to that genitive singular ending. If a word ends in is, it belongs to the third declension. And since this is a third declension word, it ends in is. Okay? But what are the endings besides that? Various, is, e. Well, let's go ahead and put in our stem flumen, flumen, flumen on all the rest of these, since that is our stem, not flumen, flumen. If this was not a neuter word, then what we would do is we would be taking our flumen and filling it in on all of them, including in the accusative. But now that this is a neuter word, these have to match. And so I'm not filling in the stem flumen on the accusative singular. I'm just making it flumen. Okay? So various, is, e, m, which we're going to ignore, a. So if we wanted to say in the river, it would be in flumine. And then how do the ends go over here? Well, it goes ace, ibis, ace, ibis, except we need to use a's on our nominative and our accusative plural. So flumina means rivers, and it also means rivers if the rivers are the direct object, if we're verbing rivers somewhere. So if you're saying, I see rivers, you would say flumina video. Flumina video. Okay? You wouldn't say fluminace. Flumina video, because it's a neuter word. Okay, now how do the rest of our endings go? Ace, so fluminum. Ibis, and it's here, ibis. Okay. So this is the declension of flumen, fluminous. It's all the third declension words you learned, except nominative and accusative have to match, except nominative and accusative have to match and be a. Okay, so that is a third declension neuter word. And there are other words that work like this as well. Let's see, just got to get there. Here we go, on page 51 in your books. We have flumen, fluminous, which means river. We have iter, itineris. So itiner is our stem. Stem for body. Vulnus, vulneris. And vulner is our stem. Agmen, agminis. So agmin is our stem, and then nomen is our stem for nomen, nominis. We're going to get a few derivatives from this list as well. Corporal means, corpus means body, corporal just means referring to the body. So the corporal works of mercy are the works of mercy you do to the body, feeding the hungry and things like that. An itinerant salesman. So a salesman who wanders around and travels. So itinerus means a journey, march, or a route. So an itinerant salesman or an itinerant anybody is somebody who goes around doing whatever it is they do. And you nominate somebody, you name them. If you nominate somebody, you name them for something. And that comes from nomen nominis. Also, here's another one for you. These three you can obviously use, but I'm going to give you another one they didn't get. If somebody is vulnerable, that means they are woundable. So vulnerable is another derivative you may use. Can't think of anything for agmen agmenis, unfortunately. So 4 new derivative options for you. And I want to point something out here, actually, before I move back off of this list. Notice that these are all neuter words, but only some of them have the N showing you that they are neuter words. Why do you think that is? I'm going to tell you why that is. If you look at corpus, corporus, or if you look at iter itinerus, let's do the top one. That's the first one that shows that. If you look at the ER, you might look at iter itinerus, look at ER and say, okay, a journey is not a person, so it has no natural gender. According to the error rule, it's a masculine word. You would think it's a masculine word, but there are exceptions in Latin, and when there is a word that's an exception, the dictionary will give you the gender. However, flumen doesn't have an N. That's because if you look at flumen, fluminous, you'll see that flumen ends in the letter N, and you'll see, according to the Lancet rule, it's a neuter word. And you don't need the dictionary to tell you that it's a neuter word because the dictionary thinks you're smart enough and can figure out that it's a neuter word. And so that is why. If they end in N, or if they were to end in something else in Lancet, like a T or whatever, you would just assume they're neuter words. But if they end in something else that would lead you to believe that they were a different gender, it will correct that, and it will point out that it's an exception. All right, so there are your notes that you should have, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at exercise 56 and 57, the first 2 of each. Actually, the first 2 of 56, and then numbers 1 and 3 of 57. So here's the first one. Propter vulnera miles in agmine non est. So propter means on account of, and we know that propter takes the accusative. That's helpful that there's this propter there because vulnera could have meant a nominative, or it could have been an accusative. But now we know that this is an accusative, vulnera, because propter takes the accusative. So we have on account of wounds. We still don't know what the subject is. On account of wounds, miles in agmine non est. So that does not look like a nominative. Miles is a nominative. So I think we found our subject, the soldier. In agmine non est. So in, and that looks like an ablative ending. Is it? Yeah, it's an ablative ending. Non est means is not. So the soldier is not in the, what was agmenis again? Agmenis, the column or the army on the march. It's an army when it's on the march, because when they were on the march, they were in a column. So we're just going to say in the column, in that formation line or whatever. So on account of wounds, the soldier is not in the column. The next one, imperator vulnera militum videt. So identifying our subject and our verb first. This looks like a nominative, and there's our verb. Single subject with a single ending of our verb. They match, so far that's good. So we're going to say the emperor sees Doesn't have to be the emperor, of course. Imperator also means commander in an army, so it doesn't have to be the emperor himself. So the emperor sees what? The emperor is going to see whatever it is that's in the accusative. And oh boy, vulnera militum. Oh, I know accusatives have this A when it's plural, but that kind of looks accusative as well. So let's turn back. Could be accusative. He could be seeing wounds, or he could be seeing a soldier, potentially. Now, this is where it's also helpful to think about when we see a word, miles, militis, we want to think, okay, what's the dictionary form? We always want that thought in our head, right? When we see the word militum, think, okay, go back to the dictionary form. Miles, militis. And what is the What is the Various is EMA, and sing that song each time we come across this third declension word in a sentence. Sing that third declension song. You come across a fourth declension word, sing that fourth declension song. You come across a first declension word again, sing that first declension song. Okay, ace, ibis, ace, ibis. Right, and then by doing that, that'll help us to see, oh, militum, that's not an accusative, that's a genitive plural. So he's not seeing the soldier, he's seeing something of the soldiers, right? Because that's a genitive plural. We need to be so familiar with those songs that we see militum and we know what militum belongs to, and we recognize that that's a genitive plural, that's not an accusative, singular, right? So he's seeing the wounds, the emperor sees the wounds of the soldiers. Right, and if we thought that the emperor sees the soldier and then we just saw wounds, the emperor wounds sees the soldier. If we come up with a sentence that doesn't make sense, that's probably a good indicator that we translated something wrong. If we come up with a sentence that does make sense, the emperor sees the wounds of the soldiers, then we can be assured that that's probably correct. Okay, so those are the first two of exercise 56. Let's look at 57, which goes English to Latin. This is one of my favorite sentences of the book. This is just kind of what the book is about. Just one sentence that exemplifies what this whole book is about. There are bodies and swords in the river. There's Latin for you. There are bodies and swords in the river. So the subject of our sentence is the bodies, but it's also the swords. So we're going to put both of these in the nominative. Nominative plural, and then another nominative plural. Now, of course, they're not going to look the same because they are nominatives from different declensions. So they are going to have different endings. Okay? And we have an expletive. There are. And because it says there are and not there is, we're going to put sunt. Okay? So there's sunt, bodies in the nominative. All right. We just have this on our list, so we know that this is a neuter word. Okay, corpus ends in S. You would think it's feminine, but we just saw it on our list, so we have to remember that it's actually neuter. So corpor, corporis. So we're going to do corpora, sunt corpora, et swords. Now, swords was all the way back in the second declension. So gladius, the second declension masculine. So gladius, I'm going to write just gladi, because it's not the us, right? How does the second declension masculine go? And so sometimes it's really helpful. Some of the students that get the best grades in this class, I'll see little drawings, and they'll sing the song to themselves. Us, e, o, e, orum, is, os, is, us, e, o, e, orum, is, os, is. So there are swords, gladi. Sunt corpora et gladii, in the river. Now what was river? Flumen, fluminous. I'm going to write flumen. Flumen. And actually this is our model word, so I can get it from our notes. Here's our ablative, in flumine, is how you say in the river. In flumine. Sunt corpora et gladii in flumine. Now you're ready for a hard one? Okay, here we go. Christians pray in the name of Christ, the Son of God. All right, so Christians and pray are our subject and our verb. So I'm going to put Christians, Christiani, Christians pray. So orant, if I've got a plural subject, Christiani orant, or the Christians pray. So in the name of Christ. Okay, so in the name, we're going to need ablative with name. And so name went nomen, nominis. So I'm going to put nomen in nomen. And what ending goes with the ablative again? In flumine, so nomine. So in nomine. And that's kind of how we begin prayer, right? In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. So Christiani in nomine, so in the name of Christ. So now we need Christ. In what case, though, of Christ? We need a genitive. And how does genitive go in the second declension masculine? Us I, it's I, Christi, in nomine Christi, in the name of Christ. The Son of God. Ooh, there's an appositive. Remember appositives? So Christiani in nomine Christi. I'll put my appositive here. And then I'll put the Son of God here. Orant. So now obviously the of God is going to be a genitive when we put it, a genitive singular. And that's Dei, obviously. But the Son, what does the Son need to be in? So a common mistake is just like you feel like you have it all down, right? The Christians pray in the name of Christ. That could be its own sentence, right? Period. And so because we're just adding on this extra thing, a common mistake is to just put Son in the nominative. Just put it in the nominative, right? No, Christians pray in the name of Christ. Right? So they're praying in the name of the Son of God because Christ and the Son of God are the same person. So if they're praying in the name of Christ, then they're praying in the name of the Son of God. Do you see the logic there? So we want actually Son to be in the genitive because of Christ, because Christ was the main word, and Son is in apposition to Christ, which means Son is going to be in the same case that Christ was in. Christians in the name of Christ, the Son. So we're going to say Filii, Filii, and then the Son of God, Dei, orant. Because what we ought to be able to do here is we ought to be able to say Christians pray in the name of, and take Christ out of the Son of God, right? And then if that happened, then of would be with Son, of the Son, and then of course the word would be Filii if we're saying of the Son, but we're saying of Christ, and so they're praying in the name of Christ and they're praying in the name of the Son of God. So it kind of genitivifies both of these words. Okay, so here's our answer. Christiani in nomine Christi, Filii Dei orant. So that one was kind of a tricky one because it had that a positive in it. All right, valete discipuli.